We have gone through how to checkmate with a queen and a rook and two rooks, and this time we're going to checkmate with the queen and king, and it will be the first time we use our king in a checkmate. It's also the first basic checkmate you need to know. We're gonna learn this the easy way so you don't mess up, but just so you know, you can checkmate the king on any sides of the board. Here, 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 and here. And you cannot, of course, checkmate the king in the middle of the board. So if you get your king opposite the enemy king with one space in between, you can checkmate like that, and the enemy king cannot move anywhere without being in check, which means it's a checkmate. And you can also checkmate by moving your queen to a2, which means that the king cannot move to a4 or a6, and it cannot move towards the king on b4, 5 and 6, which means it's also a checkmate. This is the way you would actually do it with one rook and king. Okay, this is where the tutorial actually starts. This is a simple way to checkmate the enemy king with your queen and king. And if you're playing speed chess with 20-30 seconds left on the clock, you can't go wrong. But there are a few things you need to know. You need to plan this. And the first thing you have to ask yourself is, where do you want to checkmate the enemy king? And I think as a beginner, it's just easier to force the king forwards towards the 8th rank and into a corner. And since our queen here is on b1, it's easier to checkmate him in this corner, g8 and h8, and that's what we're going to do. Rule 1, you want to keep your queen one square away from the enemy king at all times. The reason is the enemy king cannot move towards your queen, and it is forced to move away from you. And at the same time here, you're actually blocking the enemy king from the 3rd rank, right? The enemy king has to move away, and you move towards him. And this is actually the position you always want. One square away from the enemy king. He moves, you move. Now, what happens if the king moves here? You still want the same position, so you're going to do the same thing. You're going to move here. And now, same position, right? The enemy king moves, you move. If he moves here, you move here. And you have the same position. And you're forcing him towards the corner you want to mate him in. Here. Cannot move here on the 6th rank, right? And here comes rule number 2. You cannot move your queen here. If you do that, it's going to be a stalemate and it's a draw, right? You can't checkmate the enemy king with just your queen, right? So you always have to ask yourself, does the enemy king have a place to move? And right now it does. It can move here and it can move here, and that's all it needs. Now you can start moving your king into position. Enemy king can only move 2 places. And right now you have a checkmate here, and the enemy king can't move anywhere without being in check, meaning this is a checkmate. And this is the way I think is the easiest for a beginner to do this. Alright, what you've probably noticed is in this scenario, the enemy king is not here, but it's placed here, and for a reason. We'll get back to that. Now, when we did the checkmate before, you probably noticed that there were no checks. We just forced the king into the corner with the queen, and we never moved our king until it was necessary. Now this is rule 3. There is an exception to that, and here it comes. Now let's say I move my queen here. Now I have 2 spaces between my queen and the enemy king. Not one where I can force him away from me. So obviously the king is just going to come moving towards my queen. And this is the only time I feel it's necessary to actually use your own king in what I'd call just a waiting move. Because right now you do have the correct situation here, right? The king cannot move towards your queen, and it has to move away from you. So as a waiting move, just move your king 1 place. It doesn't have to be towards the enemy king, because you already know that you want the enemy king over here. So your king can just start his journey towards that corner. Now back to our queen and the enemy king. We have the position. He has to move, and then you have to move. And that is the only time you actually have to use your king as a waiting move to get to that position, because the king can actually move towards your queen, and you just can't start moving your queen away from the king, or you'll never get anywhere. So use the king as a waiting move, and then just leave your king there until everything is correct in the corner, and it's about time to just checkmate where you use your king. As I stated earlier, as a beginner, I believe it's just easier to force the king towards the 8th rank, find a corner, and checkmate him or her. For those that have been very observant, you can see there's actually a easier way to do this. Same system, same pattern, and I'll show you right now. If I move my queen to f5, I have already made a borderline here with 1 square between my queen and the enemy king, and the enemy king is forced to move back. I have at the same time blocked the enemy king from the 5th rank, meaning that I could actually put him in a corner right here with fewer moves, just so you know. But start by just using the 8th rank and a corner. Just use your queen and just start using the king when everything is ready for a checkmate, and use the pattern. And if you have 20-30 seconds left on the clock, you'll be fine.